What I'd like to talk about today is how smaller, smarter, nimbler companies outmaneuver the giants that they face. An American literary theorist by the name of Kenneth Burke said that stories are equipment for living, which I like that turn of a phrase. And I wrote Killing Giants sort of in that vein. I wanted to tell stories. And I did my best to get out of the way so that I wasn't trying to tell their stories for them, even though sometimes I stumbled a bit as I tried to lead an interviewer in a particular direction. I did my best to get out of the way and let my heroes tell their own stories. So in that spirit, may I tell you a story? I want to introduce you to a gentleman named Herman Mashaba. Just to set the tone for what we're going to talk about here today. Herman, like so many entrepreneurs, is a hustler at heart. He's a guy who largely raised himself on the streets of the townships of South Africa. From the age of 16, he provided for himself and for his family as a professional gambler. At the age of 16. You play Texas Hold'em? Anyone? You play some cards? We all play some cards, don't we? You learn things. Interview a professional gambler sometime. Ask them about personal tolerance for risk. Ask them about the tells, those nonverbal signals we give off when we don't want the other person to know that we hold nothing in our hands. Well, Herman had that education from a young, impressionable age. And frankly, it served him rather well. Here's a man who then went on in his professional career into a series of succession of commission sales jobs. He's selling insurance, he's selling tableware, and he gets into cosmetics. And in cosmetics, he finds something very interesting to him. He sees a consumable product. He sees brand loyalty. He says, if I get a customer, I can keep a customer. I can grow a business. However, like many young men of his time and place and age, he realized that this track that he was on was not necessarily the one that was going to lead him to where he wanted to go. So he cautiously approaches a colleague with a background in manufacturing. He says, let's start a company. Let's do it in cosmetics. And they approach a financier, they get some financing, and they launch a company. They name their company Black Like Me. Now, stop, recap just for a moment. This is a black entrepreneur launching a company called Black Like Me. Intriguing as the story progresses is that he's doing this during apartheid. People like Herman Mashaba are what I would call giant killers. These are people who get up every morning and their feet hit the ground and they go to the office and they compete against brands, companies that on paper should be able to roll over and crush them. And yet, for some reason, they not only survive these encounters, but they win. They thrive under these conditions. And we as students of business, we want to understand this. We want to know, how is this possible? What is it that they're doing that we find so difficult, that we all find so difficult? We want to capture that. We want to apply it to our lives and our companies and our families.
Denny's approach is simple. He interviews key executives before each event and then selects from the more than 70 interviews within the Killing Giants body of work to present. No dry lectures or fluffy anecdotes, just the right stories, direct from the source, with all the dots connected for your audience.
This gentleman's name is Robin Li. Robin's the CEO and founder of a company called Baidu. Baidu is the largest search engine in China. Robin knows a thing or two about killing giants. He's thrown Google on its back in his home country. It's a complex story, and I don't want you to get the impression that I can gloss over it quickly and say it's all due to one thing. But as I've spoken to former Google China people, venture capitalists who know Robin well, Robin himself, Baidu employees, there's a pivotal couple of things I do want to talk to you about, and that's where our lesson is going to come in. Baidu came of age as the internet came of age in China. First couple of years of our current century. Here we've got coastal cities where there's a lot of familiarity with Western brands, Western technology, Google, Yahoo, brands like that are very familiar to these people. But as the secondary and tertiary markets away from the coasts came online, those loyalties didn't exist. And into that gap steps Baidu, originally as a B2B company, providing search engine technology to front-end portals like Sina and Sohu, kind of like what our My Yahoo page would look like today. And all of a sudden, he makes the decision that he needs to be a business-to-consumer facing brand, and he throws that switch, and he's competing with his customers from day one. That's a risky proposition, isn't it? But the pivotal part that makes this work is how he positioned not only his own company, but how he positioned all of his competitors and lumped them together. What's Baidu saying here? We speak Chinese better than those guys do. Is it true? Is it true that Baidu spoke Chinese better than Google China did? You know, I've asked people who are actually in a position to know this, and they'll waffle and they'll say, you know, technically I suppose you could say that Google's algorithms were a little bit better, but you know, it's hard to say. Trust me, the consumers in those secondary and tertiary markets didn't care because they couldn't spell Google. Google.cn. If you can't spell Google, how do you shake an argument like that off? You don't. And they didn't. And they lost. There's been a lot of press about how it happened and why it happened. At the end of the day, the internet watchers in China who I have spoken to unanimously say the same thing. Baidu painted them into a corner and they refused to escape. And that's why things shook out the way they did in China.
While Killing Giants is clearly a book about competition, Denny's consulting work goes beyond tactical marketing approaches, encompassing ideas like culture change and the future of work. If giant killers are able to see trends before their competitors do, then understanding what's coming and how to spot these trends quickly is a skill he can help your team cultivate.
Now, once we acknowledge that information and technology has been fully democratized and we connect this with the ubiquity of high-speed internet, we get our second big megatrend, and that's the decline of location. Everyone talks about mobility, but again, we need to look a little bit deeper than that. Mobility suggests I can be productive outside my office, whether I'm using a tablet, whether I'm using a smartphone, whatever my tools happen to be. When we think about the decline of location, we're now acknowledging that, yes, we have these incredibly powerful tools at our disposal. We have a computing power, we have a smartphone, and we have the means to be connected at all times, right? Again, this is not a US phenomenon. We've been quoting numbers today, and the number I most recently saw was from IDC. They said within this next 3-year horizon, fully 1.3 billion workers globally will be mobile, will be conducting work outside of a traditional office setting. This huge upswing in mobile professional growth, largely driven by China. And when I say China, I should say China and India. Asia Pacific is where some of the big growth is going to be. When we look at the US, that number is growing, slowing somewhat. It's actually going to be contracting a bit in Japan because of their economic troubles. But I think within that, we have to acknowledge a couple of basic truths. The fact that the American mobile worker growth is going to slow is due to two pretty obvious reasons. Number one, we're starting from a higher base. And second, we're facing economic problems of our own. But again, if we look within those two trends, we can also acknowledge that that's driving some other behavior. And that's stuff that's very important for us to get into here. We have fewer people. Headcount is not what it was back before the 2007-2008 economic slowdown. More people are doing the jobs that used to be done by teams. And as a result, we're traveling a lot. We're working with extended teams. We're visiting customers. We're managing vendors. We're out of the office. Another trend we ought to be thinking about as we consider this decline of location is the fact that trust is almost at an all-time low. Trust in our institutions, trust in government, trust in corporations, trust in academic institutions. These are all extremely low in this country today. How do we build trust? We build it face to face. People are leaving the office so they can meet face to face with their customers and with their teams, because that's how we build trust. And that fits right into this idea of mobility in general. Now, so what happens now? We look through the modern enterprise, what do we see? We see a lot of empty cubes is what we see. Going back to Mark Dixon at Regis, they sponsor research that says half of all cubicles are empty at any given time. And that number is increasing over time. It's more than half now. Is that a bad thing? No, not really. Our people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're out there and they're banging on doors, they're meeting with customers, they're building relationships, they're bolstering trust. And this is critically important. That's the original social network, right? Anytime we're talking about small companies competing against giants, people throw speed on the table like it's easy. Here's the problem. There's a trap here. The trap is speed's hard to do. Hustle doesn't scale. If you have 100 things on your to-do list and you make the decision you're going to do it in half the time, I have news for you. You're going to fail, probably at all 100. You can't just work harder and faster. That's not the point. Mike Cassidy here is currently the director of product for Google, but he made his name back in the late 90s when he founded a company called Direct Hit, one of the first major internet search engines. He did this with 3 engineers. 18 months after he opened his doors, he was acquired by Ask Jeeves for $530 million. He followed that up with a company that began life called Ultimate Arena. It actually became Xfire, which was an instant messaging platform for gamers. And I asked him, how do you do this? How can you replicate this model time and time again? And he described the same pattern. He said, every time I start a company, I sit everyone down in the room and I say, when we come together to make a decision, I want you to yell and scream and say, Mike, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. And here's why. You have to have your evidence in hand. We're going to make a decision. And when we do, we're going to align and then we're going to execute. There's no room on a high-performing team for I told you so. What Mike gives us is a crystal view of how to create a speed-based culture, which is facts first, a fact-based decision-making organization and culture. So here, I can say as an observation, you win because you're faster, because you can align faster, because you can decisively move faster than the bigger agencies can. We know this to be true. Here's the question. Can we use this natural advantage to force evolution to happen faster? Can we not just answer email fast, because that's not really the point, is it? Can we percolate the idea faster? Can we iterate faster? Can we get one more revision done before the other guys can? Cassidy talked to me about Xfire in that they were launching a new version of that software every 2 weeks. And by the time their major competitors, these are the MSNs, the AOLs of the world, by the time their competitors seized a hold of what they were doing and marshaled their forces and got their competitive response teams and flew in that engineer from wherever, they were 2 generations on. That giant was wasting its time because they were analyzing a product that no longer existed in the market.
Killing Giants has been described as a playbook for anyone looking to change how the game is played and upset the status quo. Drawing on in-depth interviews with over 70 of the world's most effective business leaders, Stephen Denny is a recognized thought leader for business people looking to do the impossible, to topple the Goliath in their industry.
I truly, sincerely hope that out of all this stuff that you'll read, hopefully, in Killing Giants, the things that we've talked about today, I hope that one idea sticks. I hope that one idea helps you get past whatever obstacle you're working on, helps you see something in a new light. And I sincerely hope it allows you to topple that Goliath in your industry. Thank you so much. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.